The winds of Cygnus X, 7 howled like tormented spirits across the endless ice plains. Cale Mercer pulled his thermal coat tighter around his shoulders as he conducted his routine exterior check of the station, a ritual that had long since become meaningless. No one would notice if he skipped it. No one would care if the entire energy relay station went dark. But habits were all he had left. 15 months of solitude on this frozen hellscape had changed him. Once, he'd been Lieutenant Commander Cale Mercer, one of the Federated System's most promising combat engineers. Now he was just the caretaker of an abandoned outpost, exiled to the farthest reaches of charted space for a mistake that had cost 19 lives. The mining operation had been deemed unprofitable years ago, but the corporation couldn't quite bring itself to decommission the relay station completely. Better to staff it with a disgraced officer nobody would miss. Cale finished his inspection and trudged back toward the airlock, his boots crunching through ice crystals that had formed since that morning. The perpetual twilight of Cygnus X, 7 cast everything in shades of blue and purple, the distant sun barely visible on the horizon. He'd forgotten what proper daylight looked like. Inside, he removed his gear methodically and checked the atmospheric readings, unchanged as always. The station hummed and creaked around him, an aging metal shell fighting against the constant assault of the elements. Most of the modules had been shut down to conserve power, leaving Cale with just the command center, his quarters, and a small hydroponics bay that supplemented his nutrient packs with actual vegetables. He sat at the communications console and recorded his daily report, knowing full well it would be weeks before anyone bothered to review it. The isolation wouldn't have been so bad if he could at least communicate regularly with other humans. But the magnetic storms that plagued Cygnus X, 7 made real-time communication impossible. His messages were queued and transmitted during rare windows of clarity. Station log, day 462. He began, his voice rusty from disuse. All systems nominal. Power output at 67% efficiency. No anomalies to report. The same words every day. A part of him wondered if anyone would notice if he just started making things up. Asterisk, day 470. Station invaded by ice pixies. Day 483. I've taught myself to teleport. Day 500. I think I'm becoming the ice. Asterisk, as he finished his report, the proximity alarm blared to life. Cale jumped, nearly falling out of his chair. The alarm hadn't activated in months, not since the last major magnetic storm. He switched the view screen to the external sensors and froze. The storm was massive, a swirling vortex of charged particles visible even to the naked eye, lighting up the sky with rippling curtains of energy. The sensor readings were off the charts, electromagnetic interference stronger than anything he'd documented before. This wasn't a normal storm. It was a catastrophe. Cale initiated the station's protective protocols, shutting down non-essential systems and activating the electromagnetic shields. They weren't designed for storms of this magnitude, but they were all he had. The station's lights dimmed as power was diverted to the shields, and the constant background hum of machinery quieted to a whisper. Then he saw it, a streak of light cutting through the storm, moving too directly to be natural. It wasn't a meteor or space debris. It was a craft of some kind, and it was coming down fast. Too fast. The object crashed less than 2 kilometers from the station, sending up a plume of ice and snow visible even through the raging storm. The impact triggered a localized electromagnetic pulse that swept over the station, temporarily knocking out Cale's systems. The lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, and red warning lights bathed the command center in an ominous glow. For the first time in 15 months, Cale felt something other than numb resignation. He felt alive. Someone or something had just crashed near his station, and they might need help, or they might pose a threat. Either way, it was something different, something real. He didn't allow himself to think too long. If he did, caution might win out. Instead, he quickly donned his environmental suit, grabbed a medical kit and an ion pistol, and secured a locator beacon to his belt. The magnetic storm would make navigation difficult, but the crash site was close enough that he should be able to find his way there and back. The moment he stepped outside, the storm hit him with its full force. The wind was like a physical wall, pushing against him with every step. Ice particles stung his faceplate, and the electromagnetic interference made his suit's systems flicker unreliably. Visibility was down to less than 20 meters, but the glow from the crash site provided a beacon to follow. It took him nearly 40 minutes to reach it, fighting through snowdrifts and guided by little more than instinct and the occasional glimpse of light when the storm momentarily abated. What he found made him stop in his tracks. The craft was unlike anything in the Federated Systems fleet. Sleek and organic in design, it resembled a predatory sea creature more than a spacecraft, with sweeping lines and an iridescent hull material that shifted colors even as he watched. It was small, barely large enough for a single pilot, and had been catastrophically damaged. The hull was breached in multiple places, with components he couldn't identify scattered across the impact site. And there, half buried in the snow beside the ruined craft, was a figure. Cale approached cautiously, ion pistol raised. The figure wasn't moving. As he drew closer, he could make out more details, and his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't human. The being resembled a humanoid feline, with a live form covered in silver-white fur that blended almost perfectly with the snow. Its features were elegant and predatory, with a delicate muzzle and swept-back ears now laid flat against its know-her head. She was unmistakably female, dressed in a form-fitting suit of some metallic material that seemed to flow like liquid where it wasn't torn and charred. One of her arms was bent at an unnatural angle, and a deep laceration across her torso leaked dark fluid into the snow. Cale lowered his weapon and knelt beside her. To his shock, her eyes fluttered open, eyes of such a piercing, crystalline blue that they seemed to glow from within. They fixed on him with startling intensity, filled with recognition that made no sense. With visible effort, she raised her uninjured arm, reaching for his faceplate. Her clawed fingers pressed against the transparent material, leaving smears of dark blood. "Finally," she whispered, her voice melodic yet ragged with pain, "I have found you." Then her eyes rolled back, and she went limp. Cale hesitated only a moment before making his decision. He couldn't leave her here to die, regardless of what she was or why she'd come. He secured his weapon, carefully lifted her surprisingly light body, and began the arduous journey back to the station. The storm seemed to intensify around them, as if trying to prevent their escape, but Cale pushed forward with a determination he hadn't felt in years. By the time he reached the airlock, his muscles burned with exertion, and his suit's power reserves were dangerously low. The station's systems had recovered from the electromagnetic pulse, allowing him to cycle through decontamination and enter the medical bay. He laid the alien woman on the examination table, uncertain how to proceed. Federation protocols were clear about first contact situations, but those protocols assumed communication channels and oversight, not a disgraced officer alone on an abandoned outpost. He removed his helmet and gloves, then hesitated before touching her. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, her fur matted with blood around her wounds. The medical scanner was designed for humans, but it might provide some basic information. He ran it over her body and studied the readouts with growing fascination. Her biology was distinctly non-human, yet familiar enough that he could interpret the results. Her body temperature was several degrees higher than human norm, her heart rate nearly twice as fast. Her bone structure was lighter, reinforced with cartilage-like material that provided flexibility without sacrificing strength. And her cellular activity was remarkable. The scanner showed her tissues actively regenerating, albeit slowly. Cale cleaned and dressed her wounds as best he could, splinted her broken arm, and administered a general-purpose antimicrobial that the scanner suggested would be compatible with her physiology. Throughout it all, she remained unconscious, occasional tremors running through her body. He set up a makeshift monitoring system and retreated to the command center to assess the damage from the storm. Most systems had come back online, but long-range communications were completely down, and the exterior sensors showed massive interference still raging outside. They were cut off, possibly for days. When he returned to check on his patient hours later, he found her awake and alert, crouched defensively at the far end of the examination table. Her eyes tracked his every movement, pupils narrowed to slits. "I'm not going to hurt you," Cale said, keeping his voice calm and even. "Your ship crashed. I brought you here." She tilted her head, ears swiveling toward him. "You speak the common tongue," she said, her voice clearer now, with an accent he couldn't place, melodic, almost purring. "But you're not Zane. Why do you wear his face?" Cale frowned. "My name is Cale Mercer. I don't know anyone called Zane." She moved closer, studying him with unnerving intensity. Her movements were fluid despite her injuries, betraying a predator's grace. "The resemblance is perfect, yet you do not know." She pressed a hand to her side, wincing. "My name is Lyra. I am of the Felidax, though my people are few now. I came seeking the one called Zane, bearer of the cipher key." "I don't know what that is," Cale said. "Why did you think I was this Zane person?" Lyra's ears flattened slightly. "The genetic marker is unmistakable. I followed it across 17 systems to find you." She gestured around them. "Hidden away on this ice world. It makes sense now. They would have tried to conceal you." "Nobody's concealing me," Cale said bitterly. "I was exiled here as punishment after a mission went wrong. I'm just a disgraced officer minding an abandoned relay station." Lyra's expression shifted, something like disappointment crossing her features. "Perhaps the knowledge was kept from you for protection. The Obsidian Hand has hunted all bearers of the cipher for generations. They would have found you eventually, as I did." "The Obsidian Hand," Cale repeated. None of this made sense, yet he couldn't dismiss it entirely, not with the living proof sitting before him. "Look, you're injured. You should rest. We can figure this out later." As if to punctuate his words, the proximity alarm sounded again. Cale frowned. The storm should have prevented anything from approaching. He moved to the console and checked the readings. "Something's out there," he muttered. "Small signatures at the edge of sensor range. Could be debris from your ship, or seeker drones," Lyra said, suddenly beside him, moving with surprising speed despite her injuries. "They found us already." Her claws extended unconsciously, scraping against the console. "The crash must have drawn their attention. They'll send retrieval teams next." Cale stared at the readings, his military instincts awakening. The signatures were too regular, too deliberate to be debris. If these are drones, they're unlike anything in Federation technology. "The Hand does not share technology," Lyra said grimly. "They consume it, along with those who create it." One of the signatures abruptly changed course, accelerating toward the station. Cale activated the defensive systems, limited but better than nothing. A warning shot from the automated turret lanced out, and the approaching signature veered away, rejoining the others at the perimeter. "They're scanning us," Cale said, reading the sensor data. "Probing our defenses." Lyra's fur bristled visibly. "They know I'm here, and they've now confirmed you are too." She gripped his arm, her claws pricking through his sleeve. "You must understand, they will not stop. The cipher you carry threatens their dominion." "I don't carry anything," Cale protested. "I'm just an exile," Lyra interrupted. "Did you never question why? How a decorated officer makes one mistake and is sent to the edge of known space?" "Look deeper, Cale Mercer. You were hidden here." The word struck a chord. Cale had always felt his punishment was disproportionate. Others had made similar errors with lesser consequences. And there had been inconsistencies in the official report, details that didn't align with his own recollection. He'd attributed it to politics, to needing a scapegoat. But what if there was more? "My parents were geneticists," he said slowly. "They died in a lab accident when I was young. I was raised by the state, fast-tracked to the military academy." Lyra nodded, as if pieces were falling into place. "The cipher is hereditary. Your parents may have been its protectors before you." Another alarm sounded. The drones were moving again, taking up positions around the station. They were being surrounded. "We need to prepare," Cale said, making a decision. "If what you're saying is true, we can't stay here. This station isn't defensible against a determined attack." For the next hours, they worked together to prepare. Cale gathered supplies, weapons, and survival equipment while explaining the layout of the station and the surrounding terrain. Lyra, despite her injuries, proved remarkably resilient, her strength returning visibly. She told him more about the Obsidian Hand, a vast, ancient organization dedicated to controlling all advanced technology, eliminating any they deemed a threat to their dominion. The cipher, she explained, was a key to unlocking long-forgotten technology of her people, technology that could challenge the Hand's supremacy. My ancestors were guardians, she said as she helped to modify an ion rifle with surprising expertise. We protected the old knowledge until the Hand found our sanctuary world. I was one of the few to escape. I've been searching for the remaining cipher bearers ever since. And how many have you found? Kale asked. Lyra's ears drooped slightly. You would be the first. The proximity alarm blared again before Kale could respond. The sensor readings showed a larger signature approaching. A ship, not a drone, descending through the atmosphere. They're here, Lyra said, her voice hardening. Sooner than I expected. Kale, check the weapons he prepared. How many? A strike team. 6 to 8 hunters, I would guess. Augmented. Deadly. She flexed her clawed hands. I've fought them before. So have I, Kale said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. I just didn't know it. They took positions in the command center, which offered the best visibility and control over the station systems. Kale had rigged makeshift explosives from industrial equipment and positioned them at key entry points. If they couldn't hold the station, they would at least ensure the Obsidian Hand found nothing of value. The first assault came with little warning, a precision strike that disabled the station's main power in seconds. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing the interior in red emergency lighting. Then came a series of controlled detonations at 3 different entry points. They were in. Kale spotted the first attacker through the command center's reinforced window, a humanoid figure in sleek black armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its movements were too fluid, too precise to be fully human. He fired the ion rifle, catching it square in the chest. The figure jerked, but didn't fall, the armor absorbing much of the blast. More figures poured in, moving with coordinated precision. Lyra launched herself at the nearest one with a feral growl, her claws somehow penetrating the armor at its joints. She moved with impossible speed, striking and dodging, using her smaller size and agility to advantage. Kale triggered the first of his explosives, collapsing a corridor and trapping 2 of the attackers. He switched positions, firing at another that was flanking Lyra. His shot connected, and this time the figure went down, its armor systems overloaded. But they were outnumbered. For every attacker they neutralized, another took its place. And these weren't mindless drones. They learned, adapting their tactics with each exchange. One nearly caught Kale with a weapon that fired pulses of crackling energy, missing him by centimeters and melting the console behind him. "We need to move," he shouted to Lyra, who had just dispatched another attacker with a series of precise strikes to its helmet seals. "Head for the maintenance shaft." They fought their way to the narrow passage Kale had prepared as their escape route. Lyra went first, her nimble form easily navigating the confined space. Kale followed, pausing to trigger the final explosive sequence. The blast rocked the station, and alarms blared as atmosphere began venting from multiple breaches. The maintenance shaft led them to a secondary airlock near the station's power core. They donned environmental suits. Kale had modified one for Lyra's form, and collected the survival packs he prepared. "The storm will cover our tracks," Kale said as they prepared to exit. "I've mapped a route to the mountains in the east. The magnetic interference is strongest there. It might shield us from their scanners." Lyra nodded, adjusting her helmet. "The Hand's hunters are persistent. They will not be deterred by a mere storm." "Then we'll need to be more persistent," Kale replied, checking his weapon one last time. They emerged into chaos. The storm had intensified, whipping snow and ice particles into a blinding frenzy. Behind them, the station was partially collapsed, flames visible through breaches in its hull despite the oxygen-poor atmosphere. Dark figures moved among the wreckage, searchlights cutting through the gloom. Kale and Lyra plunged into the storm, leaving the only home Kale had known for over a year to burn behind them. The trek was immediately brutal. Every step was a battle against the wind and accumulating snow. The temperature was dropping as night proper approached, and even their environmental suits would be tested by the extreme conditions. They pushed on for hours, navigating by Kale's modified compass that compensated somewhat for the magnetic interference. When they finally paused to rest in the lee of an ice formation, they could no longer see the station, only a distant glow marking its location. "Will your people come looking for you?" Lyra asked, her voice slightly distorted through the helmet's communication system. Kale laughed bitterly. "No one even reviews my reports for weeks. They might not notice I'm gone until the quarterly supply ship arrives, and that's still 2 months away. Then we're truly alone," Lyra said, her tone unreadable. "We have been since we were born," Kale replied. "We just didn't know it." They continued eastward, toward the jagged mountains that rose like fangs on the horizon. The storm provided cover, but also threatened their survival. Twice they had to stop and shelter when the winds became too powerful to stand against. During one such pause, huddled in a hastily constructed snow shelter, Lyra told Kale more about her people. The Felidaks were once numerous, spread across a dozen systems, she said, her eyes reflecting the light of their portable heater. "We were guardians of knowledge from the time before the Great Eclipse, when the ancients walked among the stars. The Obsidian Hand was born during the eclipse, opportunists who hoarded technology as others fell. They've spent millennia eliminating any who might challenge them." "And these ciphers, what exactly are they?" Kale asked. Lyra's ears twitched inside her helmet. "Not what, but who. The ciphers are people, individuals with specific genetic sequences that act as keys to the ancients' knowledge repositories. You carry the sequence known as the Winter Cipher. It is especially valuable." "Why? What does it unlock?" "A weapon," Lyra said simply. "Or a shield, depending on how it's used. The ancients called it the nullifier. It can disable technology selectively, rendering the hand's advantages meaningless." Kale absorbed this in silence. It sounded fantastical, yet the attack on the station had been real enough. And something in Lyra's words resonated with fragments of memory. His parents' hushed conversations, the strange tests they'd conducted on him as a child, the odd interest certain military officials had taken in his career before the incident that led to his exile. Their journey resumed at first light, though on Cygnus X7, this meant little more than a slight brightening of the perpetual gloom. The storm had abated somewhat, giving them better visibility, but also making them more vulnerable to detection. They moved from cover to cover, Kale's military training and Lyra's predatory instincts complementing each other. Midway through the day, they spotted their first pursuer, a scout drone skimming low over the ice field ahead. They froze in place, using a snow-covered ridge for concealment. The drone passed close enough that Kale could make out its intricate construction, like a metallic insect with multiple sensor arrays protruding from its core. "They're mapping the terrain," Lyra whispered. "The hunters will follow." They altered their course, moving deeper into a labyrinth of ice formations. Progress slowed as they navigated the treacherous terrain, with hidden crevasses and unstable ice shelves presenting constant dangers. During one crossing, the ice gave way beneath Kale, nearly sending him plummeting into a chasm. Only Lyra's quick reflexes saved him, her enhanced strength allowing her to haul him to safety. As night approached again, they found temporary sanctuary in a deep ice cave. The entrance was narrow, easily defensible, and the interior opened into a chamber large enough to move around in. Ice crystals hung from the ceiling, catching and refracting their lights in mesmerizing patterns. Lyra removed her helmet once they confirmed the atmosphere in the cave was safe, a pocket of stable air protected from the harsh exterior. Kale followed suit, grateful to be free of the confining headgear. In the blue-tinged light of their emergency lamps, Lyra's features seemed even more otherworldly, her silver-white fur almost luminescent. "Your injuries are healing quickly," Kale observed. The lacerations that had been life-threatening just a day ago were now little more than pink lines in her fur. Lyra nodded. My people regenerate faster than yours. An evolutionary adaptation to a harsh homeworld. Like this one. Similar, she said, a distant look in her eyes. Colder, darker. We evolved as nocturnal hunters before developing technology. They ate from their rations, the meals silent and efficient. Cale found himself studying Lyra when she wasn't looking. The graceful way she moved, the expressiveness of her ears and tail, the intelligence in her crystalline eyes. She was alien, yet somehow familiar in ways he couldn't articulate. You should rest, she said suddenly, catching his gaze. I'll take first watch. Wake me in 4 hours, Cale replied, settling into his thermal blanket. And Lyra, thank you for finding me, even if I'm not who you expected. Her ears twitched forward, and something softened in her expression. Perhaps you were exactly who I needed to find. Cale Mercer. Sleep came surprisingly easily, despite their circumstances. Cale dreamed of ice caves much like the one they sheltered in, but vast and ancient, filled with technology that pulsed with blue light. In the dream, he understood its purpose, could read the symbols etched into its surfaces. He woke with the memory fading, leaving only a lingering sense of recognition. Lyra was at the cave entrance, alert and watchful. Something approaches, she said without turning. Multiple signatures, moving carefully. Cale joined her, retrieving his weapon. Through the narrow opening, he could see movement across the ice field they had crossed. Dark figures advancing in a search pattern, accompanied by floating drones. The obsidian hands hunters had found their trail. How many, he asked. 6 hunters, twice as many drones. Lyra's ears were flat against her head. They've deployed sonic trackers. They'll find this cave soon. Cale assessed their options quickly. There's another exit deeper in the cave. I noticed an air current coming from that direction. We might be able to circuit around them. They gathered their gear quickly and moved deeper into the ice labyrinth. The passage narrowed, then widened again into more interconnected chambers. The ice here was ancient, compressed over millennia, creating walls that glowed with an ethereal blue light where their lamps touched them. As they advanced, Cale noticed something odd, regular patterns in the ice, too geometric to be natural. Lyra, he whispered, pointing, look at this. She examined the patterns, her eyes widening. These are Felidax markings. Old, very old. Her clawed fingers traced the symbols. This says path to sanctuary. Your people were here, on Cygnus X7. Not just here, Lyra said, her voice hushed with wonder. This might be a sanctuary itself, one of the hidden repositories I told you about. They follow the markings deeper, the passages becoming more obviously artificial, carved and maintained rather than natural. The air grew warmer, and the omnipresent sound of the wind faded. Behind them, they could hear faint echoes of their pursuers, but the sounds seemed to distort in the winding passages. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber that took Cale's breath away. The ceiling soared hundreds of meters overhead, a perfect dome of ice that somehow captured and amplified the meager light. The floor was a smooth, circular platform of some unknown material, with channels cut into it in flowing patterns that reminded Cale of circuit pathways. At the center stood a raised dais with what appeared to be a control console, its surface dark and dormant. The winter sanctuary, Lyra breathed, her voice filled with reverence. We thought it was lost forever. She approached the central dais cautiously, her movements almost ceremonial. Cale followed, equally awed but more wary. The hunter team couldn't be far behind. Can this place help us? He asked. Is there a weapon or a way to escape? Lyra placed her hands on the console, which remained inert. This is a repository of knowledge and power, but requires the cipher to activate. She looked at him expectantly. Your cipher. Cale hesitated. I don't know how to use it. I didn't even know I had it until yesterday. The knowledge is encoded in your genes, just as the key is, Lyra said. Trust your instincts. Reluctantly, Cale approached the console. As he drew near, he felt a strange resonance, almost like a vibration passing through his bones. The surface of the console began to emit a faint blue glow, reacting to his presence. Place your hands on the interface, Lyra instructed. Open your mind to it. Cale did as she suggested, pressing his palms against the smooth surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a searing pain shot up his arms and into his skull, drawing a gasp from his lips. Images flooded his mind, star maps, mathematical equations, engineering schematics of impossible complexity. His knees buckled, but he maintained contact with the console, driven by an instinct he didn't understand. The chamber responded dramatically. The circuit-like channels in the floor illuminated with the same blue light, power flowing outward from the central dais in wave after wave. Hidden mechanisms activated, and sections of the walls reconfigured themselves, revealing alcoves containing technological artifacts and data storage devices unlike anything Cale had seen. "You've done it," Lyra said, steadying him as the initial pain subsided. "The sanctuary recognizes you." Cale struggled to process the information still cascading through his mind. "I see. Too much. Cities beneath ice. Networks spanning stars. Weapons that can extinguish suns." He pulled his hands away, breaking the connection. "How was this in my DNA? Not the information itself, but the key to access it," Lyra explained. "Your ancestors were entrusted with the Winter Cipher because they proved worthy guardians." Before Cale could respond, an explosion echoed through the passages behind them. The hunter team had found them. "We need to activate the sanctuary's defenses," Lyra said urgently. "Do you see anything in what was shown to you? Any protections?" Cale closed his eyes, sifting through the flood of information. "Yes, there's a shield system, and some kind of disruptor field." He returned his hands to the console, this time prepared for the neural interface. With focused intent, he activated the sanctuary's defensive systems. A translucent barrier shimmered into existence across the entrance passages, and a low hum filled the chamber as other systems came online. Just in time, the first of the hunter team appeared at the main passage. Entrance. They wore the same light-absorbing armor Cale had seen at the station, but now he could see their faces through the transparent helmets. They were humanoid but altered, with skin that had a metallic sheen and eyes that glowed with artificial enhancement. The lead hunter studied the energy barrier, then spoke into a wrist communicator. Moments later, more hunters appeared, carrying equipment designed to breach the shield. "They'll get through eventually," Cale said grimly. "These defenses are ancient. They'll have countermeasures." "Then we must find what we came for before they do," Lyra replied. She moved to one of the revealed alcoves, examining the artifacts within. "The nullifier should be here somewhere." Cale accessed the console again, searching for information about the nullifier. The neural interface was becoming easier to use, less painful as his mind adapted to the ancient technology. He found what they needed in a secure data node. "It's not a conventional weapon," he explained as the information clarified. "It's a field generator that selectively disrupts advanced technology based on specific parameters. It can target the obsidian hand systems while leaving others untouched." "Where is it?" Lyra asked, her ears swiveling toward the entrance where the hunters were now deploying energy drills against the barrier. Cale directed her to a specific alcove, sealed behind additional security measures. Using the console, he deactivated the locks, and the panel slid open to reveal a small, innocuous-looking device, a sphere of what appeared to be opaque crystal, small enough to fit in the palm of the hand. Lyra retrieved it reverently. "This is what my people died protecting. With this, we can strike back against the hand, disable their ships, their weapons, their grip on a dozen worlds." "It won't be that simple," a new voice interjected. Both Cale and Lyra spun to face the source. One of the hunters had somehow bypassed the barrier, though the others still worked at breaking through. This one was different, taller, his armor more elaborate, with insignia Cale didn't recognize. He removed his helmet, revealing features that might once have been human but were now an unsettling blend of flesh and technology. Implants protruded from his skull, and his eyes were entirely artificial, glossy black orbs without pupils or whites. "Commander Forlag," Lyra growled, her fur bristling visibly. "The last of the Feladax," Forlag replied, his voice unnaturally modulated. "And the last cipher bearer. How convenient that you've gathered in one place for me." His gaze fixed on Kale. "You've activated the winter cipher impressively quickly. Your genetic line always was adaptable. Why hunt us?" Kale demanded. "What are you afraid of?" Forlag laughed, the sound devoid of warmth. "Afraid? The obsidian hand fears nothing. We simply maintain order. Technology must be controlled, regulated, guided by those with the vision to use it properly. Your ancestors," he gestured to both of them, "believed knowledge should be free, that power should be distributed. They were naive. They would have unleashed chaos." "You mean they would have threatened your monopoly?" Lyra spat. "Your dominion over worlds that don't even know they're enslaved." While they spoke, Kale subtly adjusted controls on the console, redirecting power within the sanctuary. He could see the other hunters making progress on the barrier, their drills creating visible distortions in its structure. "Call it what you will," Forlag said, drawing a weapon that seemed partially merged with his armor. "The outcome is the same. The cipher and the nullifier will come with me, and this sanctuary will be purged like all the others." He fired at Lyra, but Kale had anticipated the move. A secondary force field materialized between them, absorbing the energy blast. Lyra used the moment to leap aside. The nullifier clutched protectively to her chest. "Run!" Kale shouted, activating a final sequence on the console. The chamber's architecture began to reconfigure, walls shifting and platforms rising or falling. He grabbed an artifact from a nearby alcove, a wrist device that the interface had identified as a personal shield generator, and ran after Lyra. Forlag pursued, his enhanced physiology allowing him to navigate the shifting terrain within human agility. The other hunters finally breached the main barrier, pouring into the chamber just as Kale and Lyra reached a previously hidden exit. They emerged onto a narrow bridge spanning a vast chasm. Far below, some kind of energy source pulsed with blue-white light, illuminating the crystalline formations that jutted from the walls. This was no natural formation. The entire mountain range must have been hollowed out to create this hidden complex. "The bridge leads to an escape hangar," Kale said, information from the neural interface still flowing through his mind. "There might be a ship we can use." Forlag appeared at the entrance behind them, his weapon charging for another shot. Kale activated the wrist device he'd taken, and a personal shield flickered to life around him. He positioned himself between Lyra and the commander. "Go," he shouted. "Get the nullifier to safety." Lyra hesitated only briefly before sprinting across the bridge. Kale followed more slowly, using his shield to absorb the energy blasts Forlag fired after them. The other hunters were spreading out, some finding parallel passages to try to cut them off. The bridge led to another chamber, smaller than the first, but still impressive. Ancient vessels were docked in recesses along the walls. Sleek craft with organic lines similar to Lyra's crashed ship, but larger. Most appeared damaged or dormant, their systems long inactive. "Can any of these still fly?" Lyra asked, surveying the hangar. Kale approached a control station and interfaced with it. "One," he said after a moment, "but it needs energizing. The sanctuary has been conserving power for millennia." A blast struck the wall near them as the first of the hunters found their position. Lyra took cover behind a dormant ship, returning fire with a weapon she'd taken from the station. Kale worked frantically at the controls, redirecting the sanctuary's remaining power reserves to the functional vessel. "I need time," he called to Lyra. "Just a few minutes to bring it online." "We don't have minutes," she replied grimly, as more hunters poured into the chamber. The firefight intensified, energy weapons scorching the ancient walls and vessels. Kale split his attention between the control interface and defending their position, his personal shield weakening with each hit it absorbed. Then Forlag entered the chamber, and the other hunters fell back, forming a perimeter. The commander approached deliberately, Seemingly unconcerned by the occasional shot, Lyra managed to land on his armor. "You've accessed more of the cipher than expected," he said to Kale. "Impressive. It makes you even more valuable." "We don't let the hand take what isn't theirs," Kale replied, still working the controls. The ship behind him was showing signs of life, its systems gradually powering up. Forlag's artificial eyes gleamed. "You misunderstand. The obsidian hand doesn't take technology, we caretake it. We prevent it from being misused by those who lack vision." "Like my parents?" Kale asked, a sudden intuition striking him. "Did you caretake him too?" Something like satisfaction crossed Forlag's face. Dr. Eliana Mercer and Dr. James Mercer, brilliant geneticists who discovered their own child carried an ancient genetic key. They were uncooperative when we offered to help them understand what they'd found. Rage flooded through Kale, but he kept his voice steady. "You murdered them, staged it as a lab accident. They chose their fate," Forlag said dismissively. "As did you, when you followed in their footsteps. That incident on Proxima Station, did you never wonder why the systems failed exactly when you were in command? Why your override codes suddenly didn't work? It was a test, Kale Mercer. One you failed by prioritizing crew safety over the mission objective. Those were people's lives. They were acceptable losses to confirm your genetic heritage," Forlag replied. "True cipher bearers always choose preservation over pragmatism. It's why they cannot be trusted with power." While they spoke, Lyra had been moving into position, circling behind storage containers. Now she launched herself at Forlag with preternatural speed, her claws aimed at the vulnerable juncture between his helmet and armor. Forlag reacted with enhanced reflexes, catching her mid-leap and throwing her violently against the wall. The nullifier fell from her grasp, skittering across the floor. Both Forlag and Kale lunged for it simultaneously. Kale reached it first, his fingers closing around the crystal sphere. The moment he touched it, information flooded his mind, not from the sanctuary this time, but from the device itself. He understood its function completely, saw how it could be programmed, activated, controlled. Forlag's armored hand clamped down on his wrist. "Release it, or your companion dies." Two hunters had Lyra pinned, weapons trained on her head. She was bleeding from a gash on her temple, but her eyes remained defiant. "Don't give it to him, Kale," she gasped. "My life is nothing compared to what's at stake." Kale met her gaze across the chamber, seeing not just determination, but something deeper, trust. In that moment, he made his decision. He stopped resisting Forlag's grip, but instead of releasing the nullifier, he activated it. The sphere pulsed with energy, waves of invisible force radiating outward. The effect was instantaneous. Forlag's armor systems failed, the lights extinguishing and the neural interfaces disconnecting. The commander staggered back with a howl of pain as his cybernetic enhancements suddenly went offline. Around the chamber, the other hunters suffered similar effects, their augmented bodies and weapons rendered useless. Kale had programmed the nullifier to target the specific energy signatures of the obsidian hands technology while leaving the ancient Felidax systems untouched. The ship behind him continued powering up, unaffected by the disruption field. Lyra broke free from her now weakened captors, dispatching them with efficient strikes before rushing to Kale's side. "You've mastered it already," she said, amazement in her voice. "Not mastered," Kale replied, helping her toward the ship, "but it recognized me, just like the sanctuary did." Forlag was struggling to his feet, his movements jerky and uncoordinated without his cybernetic enhancements. "You have no idea what you're doing," he snarled, his voice now fully human without the modulation. "The hand spans hundreds of worlds. We've destroyed every sanctuary before this one. You cannot escape us." "Watch us," Kale replied. He and Lyra reached the ship, which had fully activated now, its boarding ramp extended. The design was intuitive, especially with the knowledge from the cipher guiding him. He found the pilot's position while Lyra secured the nullifier in what appeared to be a dedicated housing built into the ship's core. The vessel lifted smoothly despite its age, hovering above the hangar floor. Forlag and his hunters, reduced to using simple projectile weapons, fired uselessly at the ship's hull. Kale navigated toward a massive door at the far end of the hangar that was slowly grinding open, revealing a tunnel leading upward. "Hold on," he told Lyra as he accelerated into the tunnel. The ship responded beautifully, as if eager to fly again after eons of dormancy. They shot upward through winding passages that gradually widened, eventually emerging onto the surface of Cygnus X-7 through an opening in the mountainside. The storm had passed, leaving the landscape eerily calm under the perpetual twilight. In the distance, Kale could see the smoking ruins of his station, and beyond that, the larger ship that had brought Forlag and his team. "They'll pursue us once they recover," Lyra said, watching the sensor displays with interest. "Where will we go?" Kale considered the question as he guided their ship upward, breaking through the atmosphere into the star-speckled blackness of space. The Felidax vessel had no trouble with the transition, its environmental systems automatically adjusting. "My parents had colleagues who disappeared around the same time they died," he said finally. "Scientists who asked too many questions. They might have gone into hiding, might know more about the cipher. The Hand will have agents throughout the Federated Systems," Lyra cautioned. "We can trust no one." "Then we'll trust each other," Kale replied, setting a course away from Cygnus X-7. "And we'll find others like us. Your people can't be completely gone, and there must be more cipher bearers out there. We'll gather them." Lyra studied him, her crystalline eyes reflecting the starlight. "You're accepting this quickly for someone who didn't know any of it 2 days ago." Kale shrugged. "Maybe it's a cipher. Or maybe I've spent 15 months in exile wondering why my life went so wrong. Either way, I finally have answers and a purpose." Behind them, alarms sounded as Forlag's ship began to pursue. Kale activated the nullifier again, expanding its range. The enemy vessel's systems flickered and failed, leaving it drifting in orbit. "That won't hold them for long," Lyra warned. "The Hand has redundancies, workarounds. Long enough for us to get a head start," Kale replied. He engaged the faster-than-light drive, and stars blurred around them as the ship leapt into the void. "Where to first?" Lyra hesitated, then entered coordinates into the navigation system. "There's a system at the edge of charted space. Rumors of Felidax survivors establishing a hidden colony. It seemed too dangerous to investigate alone, but now we go together," Kale finished. As the ship carried them through the darkness between stars, Kale reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. 2 days ago, he'd been a forgotten exile, counting down empty days on a frozen world. Now he carried the hopes of multiple species, the legacy of his parents, and the key to challenging a secret empire that spanned the galaxy. Beside him, Lyra watched the sensor displays, her tail occasionally brushing against his arm. She'd found him against impossible odds, recognized something in him that he hadn't known existed. He studied her profile, elegant and alien, yet somehow the most real connection he'd had in years. "When you found me," he said quietly, "you whispered that you'd finally found me. Was it really me you were looking for, or just the cipher?" Lyra turned to him, her expression softening. "Both. Neither. I followed the genetic trace, expecting to find a descendant of Zane, the warrior who fought alongside my ancestors. Instead, I found you." Her hand moved to rest lightly on his. "Perhaps the universe is wiser than we know." Kale nodded, understanding. They were bound now by circumstance and purpose, by shared danger and shared hope. Whatever came next, the Hand's pursuit, the search for allies, the mastery of ancient technologies, they would face it together. The ship sped onward through the stars, carrying its unlikely pair of guardians, the last Felidax warrior and the man who carried winter in his blood, toward an uncertain future that, for the first time in both their lives, held genuine promise. Behind them, Cygnus X-7 receded, a world of ice and exile transformed now, in memory, to the birthplace of something new. Ahead lay stars unnamed and allies undiscovered, dangers uncounted and possibilities unlimited. Kale set the autopilot and turned to Lyra with a smile that felt strange on his long, solemn face. "So," he said simply, "tell me more about these Felidak survivors we're going to find." As the ship carried them deeper into the unknown, they talked of many things. Of her people's customs and his childhood dreams, of the technologies they'd glimpsed in the sanctuary and the worlds they hoped to see. The nullifier hummed softly in its housing, a reminder of the power they carried and the responsibility they'd assumed. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the obsidian hand prepared its next move, unaware that in finding Kale Mercer, they had created not just an enemy, but a beacon around which resistance would gather. The game had changed. The hunters had revealed themselves, and the hunted were no longer running blind. The winter cipher had awakened after generations of dormancy, and with it, hope stirred in long, cold spaces, like the first breath of spring after the longest night.